And good morning, everybody, and welcome. We're just now about to go over 100 folks, and I'm sure it's going to keep climbing from there. So on behalf of Co-Chair Warren Tenney and myself, we welcome you, and we thank you for your participation. If you could go to the next slide, Zach. So for our meeting today, October 8th, our agenda is shown on the screen. I'll give some introductory comments and a quick update on this committee's progress and objectives. And as I do so, it's important to reinforce with everybody that we're working in the virtual environment and you're all members of the committee or the subcommittee for purposes of this discussion. So we benefit from everybody's input, whether it's in the meetings or in written comments on things that we provide. It's really been building some momentum, so we're very grateful for your participation, and we wouldn't be where we're at without you. We're going to talk about the next issue for briefing that we started last meeting, had quite a bit of discussion about, and we are centering on the topic of the CAGRD and the Assured Water Supply Program. And we had a pretty robust discussion about what potential challenges might be there related to that topic. And we did provide fairly recently a draft issue brief outline. And that was really intended to, as we've done with all the other topics so far, put something on paper so that people can really begin to study the issue, see how it's framed, and then provide your reactions, making sure that we're getting things accurate and correct, and that we're having a good discussion, ultimately with the full committee, our full council, which will be coming up in December. So where we're at, and then after that one, we have another issue to put on the table, which is the post-2025 AMA management structure. So I'll touch more on that a little bit later in the meeting, but it's essentially talking about as our committee is named post 2025, things are fairly silent on what that looks like. And as an issue brief, should we be recommending some things about what the framework of a management plan, the framework of a management goal, AMAs, things of that nature moving forward. So we'll tee that up again later on in this meeting. Just as another reminder, we're in the issue identification phase. We're not necessarily focused on solutions yet. That is the next step in the overall process as we outlined going into the committee. So we will start working on solutions in 2021. That also means we might continue identifying new issues that need to be brought back and further studied, but we're hopeful to have 4 or 5 very, very meaty issues to begin that solutions phase next year. To date, we've completed 3 issue briefs that we're ready to take to the next step, which is hydrologic disconnect, unreplenished groundwater, and exempt wells. Today, again, our 4th topic is that topic related to the CAGRD and the Assured Water Supply Program. And following this same approach we did on the previous 3, we had a discussion last meeting. We turned that into a very brief issue brief outline where we were trying to capture the nature of those discussions from last week. We did that in consultation with both the CAGRD and with the Department of Water Resources, because if you're going to talk about the CAGRD, it's best to do that with the CAGRD. And similarly, if we're talking about the Assured Water Supply Program, ADWR has the depth and expertise there. So this was not fabricated out of the minds of the co-chairs. This was a collaborative process to try to develop an outline that was a good starting point. And it's been working well for us so far, especially since we've transitioned into virtual meetings, because when we put something on writing, it becomes tangible and we're able to get actually input across the spectrum. Some of it saying you nailed it, some of it saying this is misleading, or we need to rephrase that because of this reason. And that's what's worked so well for us so far. So that's where we're at in the as Warren calls it, roller coaster ride we're on, going through these meaty and weighty issues. So just a reminder to stay on mute until you're ready to share your input. And the chat function is being monitored, and we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll call you for when the time comes. Next slide. So here we are on October 8th. We're getting close to the end of the year. December 1st is actually when our intent is to take the issue briefs to the full council for their determination of whether those issues move forward to the solution phase. But at August 26th, we had a very robust discussion on this issue of the CAGRD and the Assured Water Supply Program. We benefited from the background provided by ADWR on the history of the Assured Water Supply Program and the function of the CAGRD within that. So we were attempting to start from the same set of facts. Very wide-ranging discussion on the CAGRD and the Assured Water Supply Program. And we're really reminding ourselves and all of you that we're looking toward the future. We know there's a history. There's a 27-year history of the CAGRD, and we're not necessarily talking about. We need to understand that history, but we're not criticizing or taking any stance relative to where we are today or how we got to where we are today. But we're really putting that future view on of life after 2025. And do we have the regulations and institutions that are sustainable, that are going to carry us forward for that next part of our future? So we really appreciated your comments and discussion at the last meeting. It makes it a more complete analysis, makes it a more difficult analysis, but we did our best shot at putting together an issue outline. Next slide, please. There's really some major themes that emerged from that discussion. The first one is physical availability of groundwater. The groundwater is what this is all about, right? The Groundwater Management Act, the Assured Water Supply Program, all of these things revolve around wise use and management of groundwater. And in many ways, the transition of groundwater being a primary supply to groundwater being a backup or bridge supply, which is more like we use it today, but questions abound about whether we've made enough progress in that area of how groundwater is being transitioned and how it's used in our portfolios, and are our framework supporting continuing that transition that was originally envisioned with the Groundwater Management Act and subsequent actions. When it comes to physical availability of groundwater, it can serve as an indirect limit to CAGRD enrollment, in that the primary mechanism is whether it's member lands or service areas, and the use of the CAGRD is generally predicated on pumping groundwater and proving up that you have sufficient groundwater, and then the replenishment of that groundwater occurs after the fact with a renewable resource down the road. So if you don't have enough physically available groundwater to begin with, that can be an indirect limit on enrollment. And then there are the Assured Water Supply rules and programs and management goals related to groundwater use that can add to the restriction there. So physical availability of groundwater would be one theme. The other theme of renewable supplies, which is interwoven with the groundwater, is concerns and even anecdotal incidents where there's competition or potential competition between the CAGRD for renewable supplies and its own members and or other users. And so is the current framework setting up that dynamic where multiple entities are competing for the same supply, and it might have a complex relationship between the CAGRD itself representing its members, but the members of the CAGRD themselves seeking their own renewable resources. And then, of course, the uncertainty over the future availability of renewable supplies. As it stands today, we know that we have the very robust Salt River project. We have the robust Central Arizona project and our Colorado River supplies. But we are not, there's uncertainty around what the next bucket of water looks like and or the sustainability of those supplies themselves. Okay, third one, groundwater in the Assured Water Supply Program. So what we're perceiving through the discussion and through where we stand today, it's not clear whether or not groundwater is serving as that bridge, or that we have enough bridges in place to bridge from the reliance on groundwater to the replenishment services or the renewable supplies. And it appears, based on the discussion and what the co-chairs have studied so far, that there's not a requirement or incentive to transition to the renewable supplies, that the development that occurs once they demonstrate that they have that groundwater for the 100 years, they can stay in that space, and that groundwater can continue to be utilized in that manner. It's just opening the question of is that the outcome we're looking for in the future? With these issues or themes, sorry, and with the discussion, a repeating concern and observation is that there's a need for data, and we acknowledge that we've talked about that at length on the meeting on the 26th, and it really centers on a few things. We've identified issues, and we have yet to quantify them in some cases. That's a valid concern, and something we're acknowledging and would posit needs to be a focus area in the next phase. We've been, for 27 years, having these issues circulating through the water community, and we need to lean forward and actually provide the data and or develop the data in order to assess them. But we do, even though we might lack what some would consider to be the robust data to demonstrate issues, we certainly have anecdotal evidence of issues related to these themes. We discussed some of those on the 26th, so I'm not going to repeat them here unless we wanted to open that up, which is fine. But I think it suffices to say we have enough anecdotal evidence to lead many to believe it's worth studying this issue, and that we would define the scope and extent of the data needs in the next phase, because I feel, and I think the co-chairs feel collectively, that we've done enough work to demonstrate that there's an issue or potential issues that merit further research, and that the data needs to be generated in that next phase. We actually know enough now about these potential issues. We have more knowledge about it than we did in the first place when the CAGRD was created as a solution to perceived problems at that time. So we're at least equivalent to the level of understanding of when the CAGRD was created, but I think we're well beyond that with our 27 years of observation. Next slide. So what that brings us to is kind of the more open-ended part of the discussion. Is we're grounded in the discussion from last meeting. We had issued an issue brief outline that is intended to spur discussion. And our goal is to generate some feedback and further conversation, and it's going to come in multiple ways. By no means is it our expectation that everybody had a chance to review that issue brief outline and prepare thorough comments for this meeting, but we thought it was enough to really spur some discussion. We would take that discussion, and we were also going to be asking for your input in the future, both in a written and at a future meeting, so we can better refine it. So just rest assured that this is not a one-shot opportunity to input on it. And this will be improved and made better the more input we have, and that we're able to have conversation around it. So our goal, generate feedback and further conversation. We've taken this approach before. It's worked so far. There's no reason it shouldn't work for CAGRD and the Assured Water Supply. The issue statement was centered around those themes from the prior slide. And it's really to acknowledge the issue and challenges. We are not proposing strategy or solutions at this phase. And the outline does not propose those strategy or solutions either. It's really trying to clarify what is it we're talking about with respect to the CAGRD and the assured water supply. So that's the draft issue outline. Next slide. Goals for how we would conduct the conversation. Again, we're about to open it up for some discussion. I'm going to invite Co-Chair Warren Tenney, but also folks from the CAGRD and the Department of Water Resources to weigh in as questions come up or as comments come up. We'll rely on the expertise of the actual entities involved. That we're asking for you with respect to the issue brief outline that was submitted or that was provided to send your written comments to Zach by the October 16th date. Gives you a couple of weeks or a couple of weekends in there. But it's really the goal is to have that in time so that we can refine it and bring it forward to our next meeting, having taken it to the next level. So that date, October 16th, burn it in your brain. Next slide. And so this is the invitation for input, and I'll begin by just talking about briefly the issue outline itself. So the issue statement as is provided on the screen, but I'll read through it real quick just to set the framework. The Assured Water Supply Program and the CAGRD may not provide sufficient requirements nor inducements for certain communities and the water providers that serve them to reduce their reliance on groundwater and transition to the use of long-term renewable supplies. So that issue statement doesn't declare anything specific about any particular water provider or the CAGRD mechanism itself. It's simply saying there's enough uncertainty in these themes that we should look at. Are there sufficient requirements or inducements to achieve this outcome? Is that still the outcome we want to achieve, which is a transition from groundwater reliance to long-term renewable supplies? And many parts of the Assured Water Supply Program have been very robust in providing those inducements and providing those requirements. We're asking the question, do we have sufficient inducement and requirement in the CAGRD elements of the Assured Water Supply Program? We believe that the various challenges and the themes expressed at our last meeting, as well as those that have been raised over the last 27 years, can be traced to this issue statement. And we appreciate the Department of Water Resources and CAGRD staff in helping us put together this issue statement and draft issue outline. So I'm going to ask Zach to turn off the presentation. And then we would like to have folks start weighing in on this topic. There you all are. So I'm not seeing anything yet in the chat. I will say that we received a couple of emails from folks that did express some concern about the only 48 hours since the issue brief was issued, and we agree with that, and we're just trying to make sure people understand this is to get your initial reactions, if any, or you can continue the dialogue from last meeting about those themes. We're really looking for your reaction. Or did we miss anything? Is there anything that's of concern to some of the stakeholders that really isn't captured in that issue statement?
Looks like Robert Anderson has his hand up.
Oh, hi, Robert.
Yeah, I can't seem to figure out how to operate the chat. So that just some big, broad comments, and I'm one of the ones that raised the concern about the paper. Just as an initial point, the way the statement is worded, it assumes that we want to move groundwater users to renewable supplies. And I'm not sure that I would say that there's not a consensus on that. and that one of the issues that the paper really should look at is there a resiliency in a regional water system in which you have a mix of surface water users and groundwater users with replenishment? Is there a value in that as we go into drought cycles? We all know that a groundwater system is more resilient than a surface water system is in terms of being able to withstand years of drought. So there should be some discussion of that topic. I'm going to just touch on like 3 or 4 other kind of big picture issues that I think it's important that the paper tackle. What the next one is really just a pet peeve of mine. There's a couple of statements in here about comparing certificates and designations and making the point that, well, you got to go get a designation renewed and you don't do that with a certificate. That leaves the impression that certificates are subject to less oversight by DWR than designations are. And in fact, the flip is true. Certificates are done subdivision by subdivision. Designations basically allow subdivisions to be recorded over a 10, 15, 20-year period without individual ADWR review and approval. So I think that would be better to flesh that out. A couple other issues is the paper posits GRD as a competitor with municipal providers, as if that is really the big concern, is GRD is out there out competing the municipal providers. I think the paper also needs to consider the situation is the greater competition is going to be between municipal providers themselves. CAGRD actually acts to reduce competition by providing regional water service and regional replenishment service. If everybody's off on their own, then we have, I think you've got a number there, 174 municipal providers. They're all competing with each other for renewable supplies. What does that look like? That's likely to increase the demand for water because, as we all know, when you go to get a designation, you have projections of water demand to get that designation. And those projections are typically pretty optimistic about growth within your service area. Well, you stack every 174 municipal providers on top of each other, that projection of growth and the water necessary for that growth is going to be significantly more than what the GRD replenishment obligations have been projected to be. So that's a competition thing. I do think you have to flesh out what GRD is relying on in terms of water supplies. The impression you get from reading the paper is that GRD is just simply on short-term supplies. Those could run out, and then we're left with all this groundwater pumping and no replenishment. And in fact, what GRD does is use a mix of supplies. It has permanent supplies. It has some short-term supplies that it can use that designated providers can't use. I think the paper would really benefit from explaining that. I think it's also really important to point out that in the 2005 plan of operation, CAGRD staff came out with a proposal where the majority, 80% of the water supply that they were going to acquire was going to be permanent long-term supplies. And due to pushback from a number of entities, including AMWA, they backed off that because they don't need to have that to demonstrate an assured water supply. Well, if we're worried about GRD functioning in the future, perhaps one of the options we should look at is requiring GRD to move back to getting more long-term supplies. No discussion of that in the paper. Last point is if we're talking about the need to transition from using groundwater to not using groundwater, GRD isn't the only topic in that discussion. Designated providers get a whole bunch of groundwater allowances. In fact, there's a drought exemption where designated providers can pump groundwater during a drought if their surface supplies are threatened. Well, we should be looking at those things, not just the groundwater pumping by CAGRD. That's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Robert. I think we captured all that. That's great input. I will. I'm not going to respond bullet by bullet, although I do have thought. I look on, oh, okay, there I am. I thought I locked up on my computer there for a second. Sorry. If you can still hear me, we're good. I think it does merit some discussion, especially if we have some time either in this meeting or the next meeting, the fundamental question about whether or not there's consensus about the desire or the goal or objective of transitioning from groundwater to long-term supplies. So I am concerned about that because I took that as a fundamental truth in Arizona since 1980. So I'd be interested in discussing that further because that goes to the crux of the issue brief. We will take your input on the other particular specifics, including the resiliency of a groundwater system. So I appreciate that. We do have some chat. One is about in the issue statement, should it instead read transition to the long-term use of renewable supplies. So we'll take that under consideration. I see in the chat, Doug Dunham wants to make a comment. So Doug, if you're able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I was also one of those that requested, this be put off because we had not had enough time to adequately review the paper itself. And then basically, I agree with everything that Rob has just said. And I want to circle back to the issue statement itself. It doesn't clearly state, but it implies that really what we are talking about is a direct use of renewable. And back to, is that really what we're talking about? Because in the end, if you look at the general statement of the management goals, it's the management of the aquifer AMA wide. And to your comment on Rob's comment there, Mr. Chair, is that this does ultimately involve the use of renewable supplies. It's not a direct use, but the replenishment activity happens within the AMA, and so there is a indirect use of that renewable supply. So is that really what we're talking about? And if so, that's no different than a designated provider recharging on one side of the AMA and withdrawing the other, and then that gets us right back to the hydrologic disconnect paper that was discussed earlier. I don't want to belabor the point. I think Rob hit on all the major issues that I am concerned about, and with that, I'll let others chime in.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And we just, if you're monitoring chat, we had some others weighing in saying they agree with Rob's comments. And then the next one that I think is providing a new comment is Cheryl Lombard. Are you able to unmute?
I hope so. First, thank you, Cheryl Lombard, Valley Partnership. First off, just want to say on behalf of our members, we're committed to this process and we appreciate the paper. I agree with some of what Rob has said, specifically in terms of fleshing out what CAGR supply is for the long term. And most importantly, it's not just CAGRD using groundwater. So I know that's probably not the intent from this paper, but I don't want that lost. And back to kind of the crux of this, the consensus to move off groundwater. I think that needs more discussion. That's going to be the harder part at this. We are concerned, as those who want to move off groundwater, that their tools to do so are also under fire. And so, agreeing to that goal makes maybe us talking about those other tools. And I think you brought that into the paper, but I think that's important for us to also talk about. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. And it looks like Kathy Ferris is next up, ready to speak.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So I have a question first, which is, are we at the moment just discussing the issue statement? Or are you, Rob's comments were really all about the paper, the entire paper. So I don't know where you want this to go at the moment, and I want some clarification on that. Because I do have some things to say, but I don't want to be taking your process in a way you don't want it to go.
Hopefully I'm unmuted now. Thank you, Kathy. I think we're open to both, but if your comments on the issue statement, we can take those first because I think that's important. But there's no rules to the game, so.
Okay, well, I'll just ramble for a while and cut me off if you want me to stop. But thank you for the opportunity to comment on this. I'm Kathy Ferris. I'm a member of the Governor's Council. And I think you've done a really good job of putting this issue paper together. This is a difficult subject, as we always know when we get into the discussions about the GRD. But I don't see anything in this issue paper that isn't factually correct. And so if we look at it sort of dispassionately, I think it would be important for people to point out if there are errors in the statements of the law or in the statements of what has been happening. In my view, having spent a fair amount of time writing about this last year, it seems to me that this is a very accurate portrayal of many of the things that are happening. Now, people may not like the portrayal, but it's based on what we see. And I would agree with you, Tim, that, we have a Groundwater Management Act. Well, the purpose of the Groundwater Management Act was to reduce our reliance on groundwater. So it seems nonsensical that we would not be trying to figure out a way to keep less groundwater from being pumped. And when the discussion about what municipal providers would do, I'd like to point out Buckeye. If you haven't read the Buckeye Water Resources Master Plan from February of 2020, please do. It's very insightful. That is a community that is growing totally on groundwater, that does not want to do so, that is worried about the long-term viability of their water supplies, and very worried about continuing this path in the future, and knowing that it has to compete for water supplies with the GRD and others as well. So as long as we keep allowing growth on groundwater without a plan to find or stop that pumping down the road so that those homeowners, those businesses, those folks who are relying on groundwater will at some point be able to have a sustainable water supply, because we all know that our groundwater supplies are finite. That's just the bottom line. They are finite. So I, for one, think you did a great job on this paper, and I support you continuing to move forward on this. There isn't another forum right now for this issue to be discussed, and it is a very critical issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy, and to everyone. I turned off my video because I was having some performance issues with my computer. It's not because I don't want you to see my beautiful banner behind me.
And Tim, I might just interject that if you are not speaking at the moment, please turn your video off, and that's going to help with the bandwidth issues. So people who have trouble with their computer connections, with the WebEx, that'll help greatly maintain a good conversation.
Okay, thank you. We've just normalized being initials instead of faces. This is awesome. Having said that, I think I got the next person that I saw queued up was Jake Linderking.
Hi, Tim. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hey, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thanks for working on this paper and this issue. I've expressed before, I'm a couple generations deep in Arizona and probably will be, and do worry about long-term sustainability. Yeah, I expressed at the last meeting the need to obtain data, and I'm really happy to see that as part of your process. And I'd like to further express my thanks for allowing us to provide comments on this at a later date. I do see some things in the paper that you know, they're statements that maybe could just be made the exact opposite way and be just as true. So I'd like to provide some written comments on that, and just try to narrow it to some fact-based approaches and some ways that we can get things done. As it relates just to the issue statement, as we're going back and forth between the paper and the issue statement, what we're talking about. On the issue statement, I think Rob brought up probably one of the most important aspects of water delivery and sustainability from now going into the future, and that's drought resiliency. I believe it's been said by some that it is the gold standard to actually provide potable water based on groundwater size and to replenish those, so you get the best of many worlds. Often reduced treatment on nice groundwater supplies, but really you're providing that permanent annual buffer against an annual shortage or supply interruption of your renewable supply. So I don't have specific comments on how to incorporate that or those ideas around that into the issue statement today, but I do appreciate the opportunity to do so, and will be by the date. If there's any opportunity to provide this as a Word document, maybe it would make commenting easier as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. And I'll defer to Zach on whether or not we can provide as a Word document. We can explore that together.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I'll go to our next commenter in just a moment, but I feel compelled to interject on the resiliency question because I think that we can certainly explore the role of groundwater and resiliency, and I would agree that, first of all, a diverse water portfolio that incorporates groundwater can be a very resilient supply. And I think in the case where you don't have a hydrologic disconnect between that groundwater and that either recharged ahead of time or replenished after the fact is a component of what makes that resilient. So I definitely put on my Tucson water hat there. So when we're discussing these issues, it's inevitable that they're going to cross over to other issues, whether it's hydrologic disconnect or unreplenished groundwater. But I would say we'll do our best to address that resiliency piece, but I don't think it's as a blanket statement as it's been portrayed so far. And I'll put my co-chair back hat on and go to our next person who wanted to comment, which is Brett Fleck from Peoria.
Hi, this is Brett Fleck, Water Resource Planning Administrator for the City of Peoria. Thanks for your time today. In hearing the discussions at the last meeting and then hearing them again in this meeting, I don't doubt that there are many perspectives on how to interpret what's been written in a particular paper, or different perspectives on benefits or things like that. But one thing that I kind of keep hearing from a number of speakers are comments to other issues that we have in water resources management. So by saying, hey, we're talking about certificates here, well, designations do that too. I don't disagree that may be the case, but I would really encourage everybody to stick to the topic at hand. And if we want to bring up other water management issues that also perhaps should be addressed, that we should do that either in this venue or another venue. But I just don't really think it's very beneficial to look at a problem and then find somebody else who has a similar problem and point the finger at them. I would really like to just focus on the issue at hand. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Let's see. The additional comments I see in the chat relate to the fact that people were demanding to see my video again. So here you are. Actually, it was one person. That's okay. And then reiterating that the Word document for the issue briefs would be nice. I'm not seeing any other people raising their hand quite yet. Okay. So here we go. Senator Otondo would like to make a comment.
Oops, I'm sorry, just a second. Let me hit can't talk right now, right when I go to speak.
That's right.
My phone rings. Well, I just want to say how important I think this issue is. First of all, as you all well know, I come from Yuma, how important the river is to the river communities, but I also represent Buckeye. And Buckeye's master plan shows a population of 1.3 at its build out and says that without change in direction, the physical groundwater supply underneath Buckeye isn't sustainable. And so I just really want to point out how important this is for all parts of my very, very vast district with different interests in very different parts. We had a water vetting forum just 2 days ago, and I'm sure some people were alarmed when I said, well, we may be looking at legislation, and I just want to calm everybody's fears that I would never run any legislation that hasn't been properly vetted through all of the stakeholders involved. But I do think that this subject is extremely important to discuss. And I also want to say, when I said that in the water vetting forum, it was also a call out to everybody that more focus needs to be put on GRD. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Very helpful to our committee and our group to know when there's significant interest in the legislative body. So thank you. We have Rob Anderson would like to make a clarification. Back to you, Rob.
I realize that I just two small points, and I'll be very brief. One, I didn't say who I was speaking on behalf, and I'm doing that on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Central Arizona. But the other point about the issue statement, and Tim, it was your response that I think I may have not been very clear. When I'm talking about moving from groundwater to renewable supplies, I'm referring to, is there a system that relies on groundwater use with replenishment? I'm not suggesting, and nothing I've said should suggest, that we're not committed to safe yield, that we're not supportive of a long-term system that meets safe yield. We are talking about continued groundwater use with replenishment. Yes, that raises the hydrologic disconnect issue, but to Mr. Fleck's point, that's a separate paper. This is about whether we want to transition everybody to renewable supplies or not. So thank you for the opportunity to clarify that.
Thank you, Robert. And hopefully we're on the same page as far as what is meant in the issue statement and what your comments were. Okay.
Dave Roberts might have a comment. I see he's got the raised hand function up there.
Okay, Dave, if you're there.
Yep. Thanks, Tim. And thanks, Zach. I came in late, so I just got on. So I missed a lot of the conversation prior to this time, but I did hear what Senator Otondo had to say, and I just wanted to support what she had to say relative to legislation, that if there's any legislation that comes out of this process, that it go through a vetting process and be supported, particularly by the CAWCD board and the board that oversees the board members that oversee the CAGRD as well. I think it's important that, you know, they ultimately have to sort of follow the legislation. And so whatever changes we come up with, they are going to be critical relative to the support of that. So I just wanted to mention that. I think it's important that, again, we reach consensus on these sort of things. Otherwise, we're just going to end up battling each other. So thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that comment, and that input's well taken. I know that there are a number of CAWCD board members even on this call, but I know that entity and that agency, just like all of us, they need to have their opportunity to discuss, provide input collectively and individually. So that's a great piece of input there, Dave. Thank you. And I believe my co-chair, Warren Tinney, would like to make a comment.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate all the feedback and the comments that have been made so far. It's helpful, and we'll do our best to continue to try to incorporate and make sure that we have a good issue brief for this topic. I just wanted to make sure, kind of a little bit in response to Dave's comment and Senator Otondo's comments, in that that's why I think this process is really beneficial. It gives us an opportunity we're trying to identify and acknowledge that we have an issue here with the Assured Water Supply Program and the CAGRD that is worth exploring and looking at strategies on how we can improve it to be better well beyond 2025. And so neither Tim or I have any intentions of there being any legislation for this year, because we've got a lot of discussion still to do, and we don't even know what those strategies would be. So that we would want to propose, and that's something that needs to come as we work through this process. And I just feel it's important to emphasize that we've been, I know Tim just made a comment about this earlier. I certainly have always viewed that the 1980 Groundwater Management Act was put in place as a way for the state to address and deal with its dependence on groundwater, and to try to reduce its reliance on groundwater in a way that is sustainable for the long haul. And that is by encouraging and promoting long-term renewable supplies. The issue outline states in the first sentence that the Assured Water Supply Program was designed to sustain the state's economic health by preserving groundwater resources and promoting long-term water supply planning. I believe that's what we've been working on for the last 40 years, and particularly since the Assured Water Supply Program was put in place. And so what we were trying to do here in this paper is to, though, focus in looking forward. How can we, is it an issue for us that we have a number of providers, of communities, water providers that serve them, that are still relying primarily on groundwater, And we tried to craft an issue statement that could serve as an umbrella that would allow us to talk about many of the issues that have been brought up today and in the past. And so we're still, so what we're hoping to do is to and hope that folks will recognize that what we're trying to do is to identify, acknowledge that this is an issue. We feel that we've come up with a statement that serves as an umbrella to cover many things that have been mentioned, such as the whole issue of, well, if we're wanting to continue to reduce our reliance on groundwater and move towards more long-term renewable supplies, what requirements or inducements do we need? As Cheryl pointed out, what tools do we need to have in place to move from groundwater to long-term? The paper brings up and acknowledges the supplies that CAGRD has been able to use to replenish. But would it be beneficial if there was more of a requirement to have a longer than just a secure 20-year for the replenishment obligations that and make sure that there are supplies for well beyond? That's why we're hoping that all of those things we can talk about and continue to discuss under the umbrella of this issue statement. So anyway, I'm starting to ramble, so I'll turn it back to you, Tim, but I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Warren. No rambling. It's all good. Appreciate the comments and reminders along the way of where we're at in the process and what we're trying to achieve. We do have Laura Grignano's hand. We're talking CAGRD. Let's hear from CAGRD.
Thank you, Tim. Can everyone hear me? All right. Well, thank you. I just wanted to thank you and Warren for starting us off. And I think, Tim, you did a great job giving the description of the conversation so far. I really did appreciate the major themes slide and the challenges identified, because I do think when we talk about CAGRD issues in the context of the Assured Water Supply Program, you start to see that the list adds up. This isn't a simple issue. It's hard to define and refine, and I think that's one of the challenges that we are facing. But CAP is committed to engaging in these discussions that come up regularly about the GRD in the context of the Groundwater Management Act and the Assured Water Supply Program. And we do believe that this is, the correct venue. We have the stakeholders here, that all of the stakeholders necessary to have these discussions. I appreciate Senator Otondo's comments about legislation and working together through this process so that we can all work on some type of comprehensive solutions. And I know that our board is very interested in these issues. We are keeping our CAGRD and Underground Storage Committee up to date on the council, and specifically the post-2025 AMA committee. I recently just gave an update at our last committee meeting, and we'll be providing the issue briefs to the committee at our November meeting. So they're very much interested in this process. And so I just wanted to offer up that. I don't have any magic solutions, but I do know that the GRD is often really kind of the lightning rod to a lot of these issues that don't just deal with specifically to the GRD. These are bigger growth issues that affect the valley. And I think that's why we're running into some of the challenges that we're facing. But thank you. We're committed and happy to be involved in the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. And I appreciate your comments, and also just want to add a perspective to it that, I mean, I haven't been in Arizona water as long as some of you, but it has been over 20 years. And not because I'm one of the co-chairs, but I think it's worth noting that this is one of the most productive conversations that I've been involved with related to the CAGRD and the Assured Water Supply Program. And I think that's healthy, and I think that is a benefit for us to, even though it's hard, to continue the dialogue and continue working with each other, and not shying away from the hard questions, because the goal is to come to some form of conclusion about, one, is there a sufficient enough issue or set of issues that this is something to focus on in 2021 from a solution standpoint. And I'm not presuming any particular outcome there. And further, having the particular stakeholders engaged that we do, which Laura just touched on, this is the right group for this. And we need to we need to be factual. We need to make sure it's not being misleading in any way. And the only way to know that is to have people react to it, and react in a constructive way, to say, just like Rob Anderson did. He said, here's my concerns with it. And again, that was based only on a couple of days with it. I'm sure we'll hear more, but that's the goal, is to try to put something out there that's as best as we can do from where we are, and our understanding on it, which is always going to be through our filtered view of the world. And by having this robust group comment, react, discuss, is how it becomes more focused on if there's an issue, what is it, and how do we want to approach it. So thank you. Sorry for going on my soapbox for a second, but I appreciate the comments from Laura and everyone, and I think we're on a good path. And my hope is that we stay on the path. There's a comment in the chat, so I can either read it, or Dave Snyder, would you like to make that comment, or just have me read it?
Good afternoon, and I would like to make that comment.
Okay.
First of all, this really is an excellent forum, and not only because of the concept of post 2025, but also because it really, I'm hopeful that it implies this is a statewide issue. And we have had solutions, and they were referenced early, the SRP system and the CAGRD. Those are helpful elements in Arizona's water future, but they are bounded by legal entanglements that prescribe their scope of activity. And I would submit to you, just as Senator Otondo mentioned for Yuma, this is a statewide issue. And all of Arizona, for the most part, is facing a groundwater issue. I'm mindful of the fact that we have AMAs that have safe yield, and that's a very admirable goal. The Pinal AMA, as most of you know, does not have that as a management goal. And I would submit to you that other parts of Arizona are in the same boat, if you will, as the Pinal active management area. So it is incumbent upon us as stakeholders and visionaries for the state of Arizona to work together to craft something that addresses the larger picture. As you said, Mr. Chairman, we all come to the table with our filters and with our baggage. But on the other hand, we believe in solutions, if that were not the case, that benefit everyone as best we can. If that were not the case, we wouldn't have been negotiating about Colorado River issues. We wouldn't be negotiating on a myriad of other things. Negotiated and discussed solutions are always better than litigated solutions, with all due respect to the Full Employment of Attorneys Act. So I would encourage this group and certainly the council to adopt the biggest shovel possible and to consider solutions and issues as if we were talking about the entire state. There's no part of Arizona that shouldn't be considered as we try to move forward on a successful and sustainable path into the future. And I'm pleased to be able to offer a little bit of comment and to be part of this particular august body. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comments and your input. And we've just been promoted to being an august body, so that's it. That we can all put that on our resume now, which is good. So thank you for that. Our next commenter is Spencer Camps, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted to, well, thanks for the discussion. You know, these kind of big picture issues are always kind of fascinating and interesting, and you have a large group for a lot of good input. But you know, from this document, you know, we have this fundamental issue statement where we're moving, as I read it, we're moving off groundwater. And then it seems to be pushing or encouraging, I should say, future demand to renewable supplies, which will obviously create great pressure for parties or individuals to seek water transfers, which has been a very controversial issue, as we all know. And so this document really is kind of diving into the issues of how we grow and where we grow. And I think that's an important discussion. And in light of that, since we only got the document 2 days ago, I think asking for comments by the 16th is very premature. That's only 8 days away. And so I would like to ask that since this document, I'm sure, has been worked on for at least a couple months, to give the parties a little bit more time to provide comment, to ensure that this document at the end of the day is accurate.
That's it. Thank you, Spencer. Are you okay? I just wanted to make sure you had completed your comments. With respect to the accuracy of the document, we very much are interested in any specific things that are perceived to be inaccurate. I think it's worth repeating that we did work very closely with CAGRD itself and with the Department of Water Resources with accuracy as a primary goal. So if there's inaccuracies in there, that's feedback we absolutely want to hear about and potentially discuss. As far as the time frame goes, our goal of the 16th is to give enough time to do a meaningful turnaround in advance of the next subcommittee meeting. But by no means does that mean that the conversation stops there or that the paper wouldn't necessarily evolve moving forward. Much like the other issue papers, this is a very similar timeline, and we've gotten them to what we feel is a sufficiently complete product to be able to have the conversation with the full council. And I am certain that all of these issues will evolve after that conversation. So we appreciate any effort that can be provided between now and the 16th. And we definitely want to keep people at this table, virtual table, whether it's through the document or through these meetings. I think, again, giving credit back to Laura, I think Laura made the observation that this is the right forum for this conversation. And I believe we all believe that, and it only works if we all contribute to that. So thank you for those comments. We have another comment from Michelle, and if Michelle, you typed it in the chat, but if you would be willing to provide it in your own voice, that'd be great.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm listening to our conversation and I'm getting older. I know you guys are getting older as well, and we seem to have the same conversation about CAGRD every few years. And I'd just like to challenge everybody, don't look at the paper for the words that are written on it, but think about it fresh, because what I'm experiencing is similar to what happened in the Pinal AMA a few years ago. Everybody was wringing their hands about extinguishment credits and the value of extinguishment credits. And while we were all wringing our hands, the availability of groundwater went away and stopped everything. There's no more CAGRD enrollment right now. There's no certificating right now because it's all being limited by reservations of groundwater that no one can control. And the same thing is now happening in the Phoenix AMA. And so I don't think we have the same fear of unfettered enrollment that we had maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, whenever CAGRD was started. I think we need to think about, there is a natural limitation on CAGRD enrollment because we simply don't have the available groundwater to grow unfettered under the current assured water supply rules. And that should be acknowledged in the paper. That we're not looking at this without physical reality. And so what I would like to see, and I know everybody at every meeting hears this from me, I would like us to see make CGRD better. There are a lot of people that are relying on CGRD right now. They're already enrolled. I think there could be some improvements. I'm sure Laura has some ideas. So I'm fully supportive of making CGRD better. In addition, looking forward, I don't see that there's unfettered enrollment in CGRD. What I see is people are running out of physical available water, and they can't roll in CGRD and develop a project without water. So what we need to address is how do we go forward in a way that is sustainable and help people do what they need to do, which is develop their property. And we do that by looking at the policies we have around use of sustainable water. There are some inequities in how designated providers are treated versus certificated providers that we need to address. There are some outdated policies that were originally put in for conservation that could be dealt with in a separate way that would help developers develop with sustainable waters, which is what we want. So I think that, refocusing our discussion a little bit on what is it like today and what should it be going forward would be really helpful to improve the paper. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I was busily writing that down because I that's a wonderful comment. And I think it touched on a couple things that I just wanted to reflect back to you, because I think they're great reminders. One is, how do we make CAGRD better? And I think everybody would have an interest in, and I'm not saying the CAGRD is not a well-functioning machine right now either. But if there are opportunities to make it better, to make it service its members better, to make it to address some of these issues or concerns, I think that's a great framework with which to view the problem or the topic, not implying a negative by saying problem. Also, one way to get focused attention on solutions is for this conversation to continue, because that is the next stage. The next stage is on all of these water management questions. What are the solutions? What are the goals and objectives that we can all agree are worthwhile, and where should investments be made to address them? So I think your comments are a strong bridge toward how to view this topic and what could be the positive outcomes on the back end of it. So thank you for that.
Tim?
Yes.
Tim, if I may, I just wanted to also just kind of echo your comments and saying I really appreciated Michelle's remarks. And just, I know again that not everyone has had a chance to really dive into the paper. But, her points about physical availability was brought up on the 26th, and I think they're spot on. And that's one of the reasons in the issue description, it's one of the first things that is acknowledged and recognized. as concern about the long-term of just dealing with the physical availability of groundwater. And we actually tried to minimize, we reference about concerns, the issue about enrollment and there being not really any, really one key mechanism for limiting enrollment. But agree that what we are trying to do here is just identify the issue so that we can acknowledge that it is an issue that we would want to looking for to improve beyond 2025 so that we can then start working on those solutions and coming up with all the different things that have been referenced. So again, just want to remind everyone in this paper, we're not trying to spell out potential solutions. We're just trying to identify the issues so that we need to be talking about and so that we can then develop those issues. So thank you, Tim.
Yep, thank you, Warren. We would like to hear from Senator Otondo again.
Thank you, Tim. Just a couple of comments that were before. First of all, I would like to say, yes, how we grow and where we grow, very important. So thank you for that comment. And also the comment about this being a statewide issue. It is, and it needs to be discussed on a statewide platform. I represent Yuma County, Pima County, Pinell County, and Maricopa County, all with different water interests. Amongst my constituents, I have members of CAGRD, and then there is Buckeye that ADWR has already issued an analysis for their assured water supply for 120,000 feet of groundwater. And the only way to replenish that is taking water off the river. Well, everyone knows the controversy with that. And my district, as I said before, has very, very different perspectives from each of the different counties. So it does need to be statewide. How we grow and where we grow is very important. And I know this may not be perhaps supported by this group, but I did read the paper that was published, the white paper, The Elusive Concept of an Assured Water Supply, that was just published months ago. And I would like to ask if also the members of this body would be interested in reviewing some of their points that were brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Otondo. And I believe most folks have either seen notice of that paper or may have reviewed it themselves. And so thanks for bringing that forward as a potential for those that want to discuss the elements of that. Doug Dunham had just inputted a request for more time, and I'll just reiterate that the 16th is when we're asking for your comments, but the conversation doesn't end there. That just gets us positioned to have another version of the paper for our next committee meeting, but it doesn't mean additional input won't be considered past that. We want to keep the process moving, but we want to keep everybody engaged. So we're setting some goals to try to keep us on a trajectory, but by no means does that mean comments after that point would not be brought forward. Keith DeVore has a comment. Keith, are you online? I'm not. Oh,
I see that he's there, but he's not unmuting himself. Let me see if I can. Okay, see, it says the speaker is not working. Keith, if you'd like, you can type your comment or question. There you are. Yes.
oh yes.
Great. Sorry about that. I've had an issue. So I appreciate everybody's comments. I'm Keith DeVore. I'm the Water Resources Manager for the town of Queen Creek. So we are the bigger elephant in the room in this conversation on many different levels. And so I appreciate everyone's comments. And I am interested, I too would like to echo a little more time would be helpful in getting comments back, but we'll do our best to get stuff in by the 16th. But I would like to better understand on when the comments come in, you know, kind of how we're going to go through this process, because I've heard a lot today about future growth and water availability, which obviously are huge issues when it comes to the CRGRD. But from the town of Queen Creek's perspective, we'd also really like to talk about solutions to offboard from the CAGRD. As folks know, we are doing almost everything in our power, you know, and trying to come up with sustainable solutions for sustainable water and to de-enroll from the CAGRD. We've had many conversations with Laura and the folks at CAP on how we can go about doing that, but it's a difficult traverse trail that we're trying to walk, trying to find ways that we could actually come out of the CRGRD. We all know that this was a program that was put into place that was never meant to go to, I think, the level where it's at right now. And as important as it is to come up with other communities and how we can continue to grow and use CRGRD, I think a big part of that would be trying to work with communities like the town of Queen Creek to de-enroll. And how can we actually offboard? What are some solutions that are out there, because as our community continues to grow, our board has made it clear that we would like to de-enroll our constituents from the CRGRD, but it's very challenging. We are in the middle of many different ways to try to find sustainable water. And, you know, I would love, you know, if we could get past our 495 acre feet of CAP subcontract water, and if we could move to a more sustainable solution. So I'm very interested to see how the comments will come back, but I do believe that is going to be a huge part of this process for communities, you know, like Buckeye, like the town of Queen Creek, and how we can find more innovative solutions, because we are, you know, we are the pioneers and a lot of these different things coming together, because it is so difficult now that we've made the choice to want to, you know, remove ourselves as much as possible from CRGRD. It's very difficult going down that road. So I appreciate all these comments, and I'll look forward to having these conversations and looking this, you know, from many different angles. And I think strongly one of the biggest ones are, how do we have large users like the town of Queen Creek? How are we able to then, once we've made that decision, to de-enroll from CRGRD? So thank you all for your time.
Thank you for providing that perspective. That really rounds out some of the framework around the GRD for those that are seeking a path off of the GRD. What are the tools and solutions there? So thank you for that. Some comments in the chat, giving kudos to Michelle for her comments. And then Dave Roberts just reiterated that anything to be successful would need to be supported by the CWCD board, and they need to champion these changes if they're going to be made. And so thank you for that reminder, Dave. And that's a key element of why this forum makes sense, and the close relationship and working we're doing with CGRD makes sense. So Senator Hurtado wanted to make an additional comment. Unless I'm just slow getting to you. Sorry.
No, that you were just, that was from this other time. So thank you, Tim. I have no more comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Just a reminder to identify your occupation and or connections when you're giving your comments. I think we've been hit and miss on that. And as your moderator, I've been terrible about bringing that up. So thanks for that reminder. Doug Dunham has a comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I struggle with technology sometimes. actually all the time. So just a quick background. My name is Doug Dunham. I am currently employed by Epcor Water, and I'm going to try to keep my comments higher level because after 20 years of being intimately eyeballs deep in the Assured Water Supply Program and the CAGRD, I tend to dive into the weeds way too quick, and my kids and my wife get tired of hearing me talk about it all the time. So I would also echo what Dave Roberts mentioned, that any of these changes that we're contemplating, once we get to that point, not only have to be approved by the CAWCD board, but we, obviously will have to go through the state legislature, the community itself out there, and probably as just as important, maybe not more so than everybody else, is the approval of DWR, because the last thing we would want to do is endanger the Assured Water Supply Program itself, which I think is the crown jewel of the entire groundwater code. So one of the questions that has kind of keep coming back to my mind is, as we talk through this, are we actually talking about retroactive actions? So, subdivisions that have been created and enrolled in the GRD, 10, 20 years ago, or, say last week, are we going to make them somehow change the function and how those subdivisions operate into the future regarding how replenishment happens, or does new supply have to be brought to them? And then the other high level overview is this really kind of breaks down to what do we want to see. I will remind everyone that the certificate, groundwater-based certificate that is a member lands, is not mined groundwater. It is replenished after the fact. So I think everyone here can wholeheartedly agree that continued growth or any growth on mined groundwater is not a good thing. And, unfortunately, Pinal has been brought up, and that's kind of a poster child of allowing mined groundwater to happen. For years, because of their odd goal, the assumption was the municipal industrial sector really didn't have to follow up with reduction of direct and unreplenished groundwater use. And for years, the department struggled against the headwinds of trying to modify the Assured Water Supply rules down there. And they finally moved forward over several baby steps to reduce the unplenished groundwater volumes down there. But unfortunately, as we can see, that's contributed to the physical availability issues that they're facing down there. Now, new stuff going forward is going to be a lot less reliant on mined groundwater, which is a good thing. But they've got the physical availability issue in the meantime. So, with that in mind, are we really talking about? We're sort of three options here. Are we talking about direct renewable use, where everybody's plumbed directly to the CAP or some other renewable source? Or are we talking about, do we want to move everybody toward a model of recharge ahead of time and recovery afterwards? Or does the current model of the GRD, regardless of what you think of the GRD, is groundwater use up front with replenishment after the fact? Does that still work? And is it more a function of how the details of the supplies and the supports that GRD has currently in place, is that really the issue? So which of those three, or is all three viable? And with that, I'll let the folks chime in. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And our next commenter I see in the chat is Jesse Fox.
Hi, thank you. Jessica Fox, I'm the Water Policy Advisor for WA. And so I just wanted to say to a point that Michelle made earlier, when it comes to making the GRD better, I think a major part of that is not just dealing with enrollment, but also the question of how do you better allow water providers and member lands to move away from the replenishment model. So that's exactly what Keith DeVore was just saying as well. And in that case, the town of Queen Creek isn't a member of the GRD itself. It's trying to help the member lands that they serve to reduce or completely reduce their reliance or completely de-enroll from the GRD somehow. And I think that the process to do that is, as Keith said, not entirely straightforward at all. And that seems like a real oversight. Having worked for the GRD myself in the past, and I'm not only acutely aware of how much of a bear it is to administer the GRD program, but I've seen how homeowners who are impacted by the costs associated with the replenishment model, they're really at a financial disadvantage. And I think that's largely unbeknownst to them when they purchase their home. So even for that reason alone, I think I'm happy this discussion's happening, and I think the GRD mechanism warrants a reevaluation at the state level to really determine how to make it a more functionally sustainable mechanism, but also to help us facilitate a reduction in the upfront reliance on groundwater, which I do believe is a policy imperative of the state and the AMAs in general. And I think we have a lot more to do to make that the reality after 2025. But getting back to maybe, an hour ago, the question was, I believe that the draft issue statement that you've presented will serve as a good umbrella statement that can capture a lot of these other points that have been raised. I was thinking back at the early committee meetings, I think in 2019, the two issues that were initially raised in the GRD were that there's no limit to enrollment, and another issue was the ongoing need for renewable supplies. And it seems to me that rather than spinning around on those topics for a couple more decades, that this issue statement sets the course for a conversation on ensuring that the Assured Water Supply Program and the GRD are structured as best as they can be to meet our water management objectives moving forward. And I also acknowledge, as has been brought up by the co-chairs, that the solution phase that will follow this will be really difficult, but I think there are a lot of sub-issues that can be captured under this issue statement. And we'll just offer a lot of potential directions for the committee to go when it comes time to thinking through the solutions. So for the purpose of just organizing us around such a complex topic, I think that this issue statement does a good job of that. And I look forward to hearing more about what others in the committee think too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And we're at the point in the conversation where we're going to move on in a moment. There's one more commenter I'm going to call on in a second. There's continued calls for more time, which I'm going to say do the best we can, and there will be continuing opportunity to comment, especially if and when we go into the solution phase. And I did hear a lot of comment, especially in the last probably 15-20 minutes, about people who are looking toward the future with and it really is the question, and I agree with that, and that's what the issue paper is around. Is the current status the right place for the CAGRD to be relative to the assured water supply? Are there things that could make it better? Are there things that are there tools that need to be added to the toolbox? Are there off ramps that water providers or communities or member lands might be able to take in the future? That's the solution phase. And I think we're very close, at least in my opinion, of being able to tee up that conversation and move into that solution development phase. And again, reiterating that this is the good forum to do that. I'd like to call on the last person I see listed, and then we would move on to the next topic. Is Bass Aha?
Yes, Tim, am I on?
You're on. Thank you.
In relationship to the CAGRD, one of the strategies, the Groundwater Management Act was some sort of traveled conversion of agricultural lands to municipal or residential or others. and it initially had some incentives for that with a pretty vibrant extinguishment credit program. Now, over time, that program has been greatly diminished, and so one of the only ways to help and assist the conversion of that ag land to municipal residential use is through a mechanism like the CAGRD. And I think that that the brief should also contain something regarding that, about the benefit of the CAGRD and the fact that that is the mechanism that now can be used to convert ag lands, because extinguishment credits have been, diminished so greatly, that if, as a mechanism, if it assists in the conversion of those ag lands to municipal or residential use, then that benefits to the water supply scenario is kind of what was intended with the Groundwater Act. So I think that we should kind of look at that also as we're talking about the CAGRD, because that the extinguishment credit mechanism is greatly diminished.
Thank you for that. Oh, did you have additional comment?
No, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Bass. That's a great perspective to bring, and also sort of more fuel for what are the things that the CAGRD could be doing better in the future, or it could be a tool in the toolbox as well. With that, I'm going to do two things. One is ask Zach to bring the slides back up, but also ask my co-chair to address the timeline.
Thanks, Tim. I just wanted to add again, appreciation for all the comments, and we look forward to the feedback that you provide in writing. I know October 16th is just around the corner, and we've kind of been mentioning this over and over, but some of the comments make me think that maybe this message we haven't found quite the right way to articulate this. Just want to really remind everybody, we're trying to identify the issue. We're trying to acknowledge the issue. We're not trying to include in this paper all the tools that could be used to fix it. We're just trying to acknowledge that there is challenges ahead of us, looking beyond 2025, so that we can take that to the Governor's Water Council and say, hey, this is an issue. We want to now work on solutions. And so, as Tim has said, we're just trying to tee up the discussion to be able to work on issues, or work on the solutions. So I just want to remind everyone, as you go through the paper, just remember, we're only trying to describe the issue that we want to be able to work on. And as has been mentioned many times, we feel like the issue statement provides an umbrella for most of the issues that have been discussed and raised today, and that you will find them described in the issue statement or in the issue outline. So just thought it was important to emphasize that one more time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Warren. And Zach, if you could go to the next slide, please. So just a reminder, this is our ask. And as Warren just pointed out, this is going to be an ongoing discussion. So if you could send any comments you do have, even if they're incomplete, by the 16th, gives us a chance to make the issue brief better, and also gives us time to reissue it prior to the November 2nd meeting of this group. And so that'll be going on to our third very robust conversation about this issue this set of themes, and I think we're getting somewhere. And I know it's difficult, but we appreciate all your feedback and input. And I know Warren and I are both committed to not leaving anything unresolved. So if you know, through the commenting period or through the subsequent discussion, if we need to keep talking to get it better, we will. But we are coming up to the December 1 full council meeting to be able to bring the best product we can forward at that time. Okay, next slide, please. Just when you thought we were done, we're not. We've got another topic area to at least introduce at this point. And so this is about the AMA management structure. So I'm just going to, the issue statement on this one is in 1980, the legislature set 2025 as a target date for meeting the goals of the AMAs. And maybe by 2025, we can meet in person again. There is no clear statutory provision regarding goals or additional management periods and plans after 2025. The fifth management plans will remain in effect until statutory changes designate otherwise. What that means is wherever we leave it, as it stands today, wherever we leave it with the fifth management plans, that is where we would be continuing to operate indefinitely. And being as how we're only a few years from 2025, we thought it was prudent to initiate this discussion. What does the AMA management structure look like after 2025? Knowing that at a minimum, we would have the fifth management plans to guide us. But should we be defining additional management periods and plans associated with them? What does the discussion around management goal or goals for each AMA look like? How will we be managing conservation and the conservation requirements moving forward, which was even brought up a little bit today on the issue we were discussing. So, and what are the other things? What are the things in a post 2025 world that should be discussed, that should be thought about, and that potentially even become a part of our management structure moving forward? So in the few minutes we have, does anybody have any initial thoughts they'd like to share? If not, you know, you can count on this being for discussion at the upcoming November meeting. And this was really meant to just plant some seeds for thought. I would like to call on Carol, perhaps to, I know she wants to make some comments, whether they're related to this or to the overall process.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I didn't really have any comments directly related to the management structure issue statement or how we're moving forward with this, although we do look forward to everyone's input on this topic. What I did want to say is that today's conversation has really been excellent. And I wanted to thank both you and Warren for leading this effort. You've both done a tremendous job. I know it takes a lot of work, and I really appreciate all the effort that you and your staff have put into this. And I also want to thank the staff at CAGRD and the staff here at DWR, everybody for their support and for their expertise that they've lent this effort, particularly with this issue brief. But most of all, I want to thank everybody who joined us here today for this meeting. You know, none of this is possible without all of you and your input. You know, as Laura said earlier, you know, this is the venue to have this discussion. This is an important discussion. It keeps coming up. It is a difficult one to have, but I think everybody has really done a great job today in finding, you know, some common ground from which to discuss this. We do share, you know, the goal of having sustainable water supplies into the future so that we have a thriving economy, thriving communities, and I almost regret that we're calling these issue briefs because I sort of see these as opportunities for us. Looking forward beyond 2025, we have opportunities to strengthen our water management, and this is one of those areas. And of course, it ties into all of those other topics that we've already been discussing in this process. They're all intertwined, and it's complex. I appreciate everybody's patience, and I appreciate your understanding too, as we've been trying to move this forward at a very quick pace. Warren and Tim are very determined, and I really appreciate that. And to do this and to take advantage of the time that we all have together, I appreciate, as I said, your patience and your willingness to move forward with this. And just wanted to say thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Carol. And we've said it before, but it bears repeating. We wouldn't be able to accomplish any of this work without the efforts of ADWR, your leadership, and your staff, and your analysis that you conduct for us. And the same, especially on these particular, or the earlier topic, goes for this Laura and the staff at CAGRD. For those CAWCD board members on the call, your staff have been very open, very responsive, and very strong contributors toward really trying to put together something meaningful about the topic of the CAGRD and the assured water supply. So you have our gratitude as well. What I'd like to say, I know we had a really in-depth conversation, and then we just sort of teased you a little bit with the AMA management structure, so I'm not seeing a lot of folks weighing in quite yet, and that's fine. We're going to have time to discuss it, but it is also one that has come up periodically as we've had various water conversations across the state. And I don't want to go out too far on a limb to say that I think most people that I interact with feel like we should have some structure for life after 2025, and that's even written right in our name of this committee. So we'll look forward to some discussion around that coming up. And Zach, if you could go to the next slide.
Tim?
Yep, go ahead, Warren.
Warren, I just wanted to re-emphasize that we're just trying to identify this as an issue. We're not trying to put any recommendations at this time into this, other than, hey, yeah, the statutes are silent after 2025. What could we maybe be working on? So I just want to make it clear to folks that we're not right now proposing, management periods of 10 years or 15 years, or, this should be the management goal. We're just trying to acknowledge that this is an opportunity for us to look at this and work on it in 2021.
Thank you, Warren. Very good. Just a reminder of the next steps. Please provide whatever additional comments you have on the CAGRD and the assured water supply issue brief by the 16th if you can. We will be bringing it back as a topic of discussion on the November 2nd meeting. And we are on a fast, tight, but achievable schedule to bring whether it's 4 or 5 issue briefs or topics to the full council on the December 1st meeting. And you've been with us this far to know that this is not the committee where issues come to die. This is the committee where issues come for a robust analysis and discussion. So we are going to keep moving. and we are grateful that all of you are moving along with us. And again, it'll be much more fun, and I should throw air quotes around the word fun, when we try to solve some of these issues in the next phase. Even Warren in his comments mentioned the word fun. So this is the fun committee. Appreciate your time. I am grateful for all that you've invested and for the conversation today. And I would like to turn it back to Warren if you have any closing comments to round out today's session.
Thank you, Tim. Again, just appreciate everyone's feedback and comments. We know we're on a fast-moving roller coaster, and we appreciate everyone willing to participate and contribute. And just again, trying to remind everyone, we're only wanting to try to acknowledge and identify the issues, or as Carol pointed out, the opportunities that we can have to that need to be looked at so that we ensure that water management in Arizona, particularly in the AMA, since that's the focus of our committee, that water management is strong and robust and can make sure that it is beneficial to many future generations ahead. So thank you, and thanks a lot, Tim.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Zach. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And that would conclude today's meeting of the Post 2025 AMAs Committee.